40 Canadian members of Parliament sent a letter to the Prime Minister. They asked him to help stop the persecution of Falun Gong in China. The persecution of Falun Gong is one of the most brutal genocides in history. Falun Gong practitioners share their personal experiences with tyranny. Taiwan hosted a special exhibit to remember Hong Kong's unique history. Organizers collected over 200 copies of Apple Daily that recorded it. The Xuzhou Iron Chain Woman incident was a terrible example of human trafficking. The 2022 Trafficking in Persons report was just released to help stop such crimes. Finally, the big banks in China are starting to ban withdrawals. The closure of small banks already caused riots, so why are the big ones closing too? Let's get into it. The Chinese Communist Party has persecuted Falun Gong practitioners for 23 years. July 20th marked the anniversary. This year, 40 Canadian members of Parliament sent a joint letter to the Prime Minister and Foreign Minister. They urged the federal government to condemn the persecution of Falun Gong practitioners in China. The letter was sent by the two co-chairs of the Friends of Falun Gong in Parliament. They are Liberal MP Judy Segros and Conservative MP Garnet Genuis. It was signed by 31 Conservative MPs, 2 Conservative senators, 5 Liberal MPs, Green Party MP Elizabeth May, and Independent Senator Kim Pate. The letter reads, "We note that the overwhelming conclusive and overwhelming evidence proves that the persecution of Falun Gong remains the largest and most violent campaign against the Chinese people in mainland China today, and that it is nationwide in scope. All the co-signers condemned the Chinese Communist Party's continued persecution of Falun Gong, a peaceful faith, and called for an end to the persecution of Falun Gong in China. The letter also proves that crimes against humanity and mass extermination are occurring. The evidence is from the United Nations Special Report, Freedom House, Amnesty International, the U.S. House of Representatives, and third-party reports from scholars. The late former Congressman David Kilgore and attorney David Matas confirmed these allegations in a 2006 report on the harvesting of organs from Falun Gong practitioners by the Chinese Communist Party. The letter states that the academic community has concluded that the CCP's eradication of Falun Gong was a mass extermination. It's been 23 years, and the persecution of Falun Gong in China has not ended. On July 20th, 1999, then Chinese Communist Party leader Jiang Zemin launched a brutal persecution against hundreds of millions of Falun Gong practitioners. He gave orders to smear their reputation, cut off their income, and physically exterminate them. The state system was ordered to eliminate Falun Gong in 3 months. It failed. According to statistics from Minghui.com, more than 4,800 Falun Gong practitioners whose identities can be confirmed have been persecuted to death. However, China blocks a lot of information, so the true death toll is much higher. The CCP also covers up its business of harvesting practitioners' organs. The bodies are cremated and those involved are silenced. Yesterday, Falun Gong practitioners called on the international community to seek the truth and end the persecution. Falun Gong practitioners who have been severely persecuted share their experiences. Shanghai Falun Gong practitioner Guo Jinfu now lives in New York. He told NTD TV that he had been illegally re-educated in labor camps for 2.5 years. He had also been illegally sentenced to 3 years in prison and unlawfully detained twice. During this period, he was tortured with electric batons. One was even placed inside of his mouth. His mouth turned mushy from the shocks, and several teeth fell out. In another case, a former engineer from Shandong named Xia Deyun was illegally sentenced to 2 years of forced labor. She was also illegally sentenced to 1 year in prison. During this time, she was forced to sit on a tiny bench. Xia Deyun said this is a kind of chronic torture. She appealed, "For those still persecuting Falun Dafa, I hope you all have a good understanding of what Falun Gong is and don't believe in the Chinese Communist Party's lies." On July 19th, Hong Kongers in Taiwan held a month-long exhibition at the Taipei Cultural Federation. It was titled "Back Up a City." They collected more than 200 copies of Apple Daily, an independent Hong Kong newspaper. The organizer told Radio Free Asia that Apple Daily is an excellent record of Hong Kong history. The exhibition was to celebrate Hong Kong's good times and cherish the hard-working people still there. Hong Kong lawyer Sang Pu now living in Taiwan, visited the exhibition on the 19th. He told Sound of Hope that people could see Hong Kong's tragic history. Historical events included the start of Apple Daily in 1995, the transfer of sovereignty in 1997, the anti-national education movement in 2012, the umbrella movement in 2014, the anti-extradition movement in 2019, and the Hong Kong version of the national security law in 2020. The national security law was what caused the top management of Apple Daily to be arrested. It was then forced to stop publishing. This exhibition has accurately represented the freedom of speech, press freedom, human dignity, and the pursuit of truth and goodness Hong Kong once had. Sang Pu pointed out that the Chinese Communist Party first infiltrated Hong Kong, then manipulated it. In the end, freedom and human rights withered away. He warns that Taiwanese people should take history as a mirror, protect their national sovereignty, and adhere to a life of democracy, freedom, and the rule of law. This will help them resist the Chinese Communist Party's bullying and infiltration. On July 19th, the U.S. Department of State released the 2022 Trafficking in Persons Report. It features the Xuzhou Iron Chain Woman incident. The Xuzhou Iron Chain Woman incident is the story of a mentally ill woman found chained to an icy hut in Xuzhou, China. She had been trafficked there and forced to give birth to 8 children. She was discovered when someone took a video of her, and it went viral. The whole world criticized China's human rights standards and asked that something be done about trafficking. According to Radio Free Asia, the report evaluates how 188 countries and regions around the world have combated human trafficking over the past year. It was originally a press conference hosted by U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken. For the 6th consecutive year since 2017. For the 6th year in a row since 2017, China ranked as the 3rd worst country alongside 21 other countries, including Iran, North Korea, and Cuba. The report notes that public outrage over the woman in chains led to the prosecution of a non-transnational human trafficking case by Chinese officials. This was the first case since 2017. The 2 trafficking suspects are still on trial. Reggie Little-Long-John, founder and president of Feminism Without Borders, told Free Asia that the international community must take a tougher economic and diplomatic approach. Otherwise, it will be difficult to change human rights in China. Many banks in Beijing, Shandong, Hainan, and other places in China are restricting withdrawals. Customers reported that their bank accounts are currently restricted. Many went to the banks in person to request their accounts be reopened. Banks replied that the restrictions were to combat online gambling and money laundering. Current affairs commentator Wen Zhao noted that the restrictions are actually linked to China's anti-COVID measures. The measures included closing cities, stopping production, reducing tax incomes, and getting COVID tests for a huge population. The cost of China's drastic measures was immense, but where did the money come from? Wen explained that China's largest pool of money is savings deposits of its hundreds of millions of citizens. He concluded the government took their savings, which is why people can't withdraw money anymore. When power is abused, people will suffer. According to Wen's analysis, all the restricted accounts show little activity. That way, when money is taken, it's harder to detect. When the victims found out their money was missing, the banks made excuses and complicated the withdrawal process. For example, the banks now require a customer to present their housing titles to unblock their account. This usually takes 5 to 10 working days. In this time span, the bank finds ways to return the funds. In April, the Agricultural Bank of China, Shanghai Pudong Development Bank, and China Everbright Bank were all reducing online transactions. They also changed their withdrawal procedures. A professor at the University of South Carolina, Xie Tian, explained that this is due to the misappropriation of funds. Actions include stealing, illegally transforming the money into wealth management products, and investment failures. The money is gone. Professor Tian also noted that the cash flow problem is spreading to the large state-owned banks. Thank you so much for listening. If you like what you saw, please like, comment, and subscribe. See you tomorrow.